everyone. Last time I talked to you during a wrap-up was my May wrap-up, which I only read 2 books. Since then, I have read 6 books. I wanted to talk to you about the books that I've read since then. Let's go. So after I finished A Court of Mist and Fury, I was hollering. I was glancing at the fantasy on my shelf, I was glancing at other things I got, but then I got this in the mail. And I knew. I immediately began reading this baby. This is Hamilton, the Revolution. This is the book about Hamilton, the musical that was written by Lin-Manuel Miranda and Jeremy McCarter. This book has 2 sections of it. The first would be, obviously, the lyrics that everyone is just in love with, including myself, the Schuyler Sisters. And this is fully annotated by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who, if you don't know, is the author of all of the lyrics from Hamilton. And then interspersed between them is little essays about the characters, about the show, about how it came to be, that were all written by Jeremy McCarter. I just love me some Hamilton. This was so much fun to read. I just adored the annotations. I loved everything about the pictures and just Hamilton, and I want to go see it so bad. But it's not the original cast anymore, so I don't even know how I feel about it. I will say, I was not impressed with the essay section of this book. I found myself almost wanting to skip those parts. I just wanted to read the lyrics and the annotations, but I knew if I skipped the essays, I would never go back and reread them because they were just so boring. I mean, sometimes they offered perspectives that I'd never considered before, or they gave me some information about the theater or the characters, but mostly I just got to one of those essays and I went, okay, maybe I'm just not a big enough fan, but that took the book down 1 star for me. I love Hamilton. I love everything about it. Just sometimes the technicalities of how it came to be are less interesting than the show itself. Sorry, Lin-Manuel, I love you. Get me tickets to the show. Anywho, I gave this book 4.5 stars. It made me laugh a lot. It made me cry. I just was not the hugest fan of those interspersed essays. The next book I read, like I said, I was in sort of a fantasy mood after finishing A Court of Mist and Fury, so I decided I would pick up a book that is fantasy, but also I had to review. This book is Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. This is a fantasy book that is compared to Game of Thrones. It is pretty much like Game of Thrones, where there's creepy aspects to it, there's war aspects to it, there's politics, there's incest, there's all just crazy stuff. I will be discussing this a lot in my review, so keep an eye out for that if you want to hear my full thoughts about it, but this book was just not as good as I thought it was going to. My main issue with it lies in the fact that it is very plain writing-wise. I just think the writing is so bland. Literally, sometimes it would be like, she had reddish-brown hair, and I'm like, just such simple and dumb descriptions of things that did not put me in the world at all. It just wasn't engaging. It was just very lukewarm for me. I wasn't heavily attached to any of the characters. I don't think I'm going to be continuing on with them. This one just did not impress me enough. People say it's relatable to Game of Thrones, but honestly that's a little bit of an insult to Game of Thrones because Game of Thrones is just so much more spectacular than this. If you want to read Game of Thrones but you don't want to be that invested in the sexual content or brutality of it, I guess, or if you want like a censored version of Game of Thrones or just something similar to it in YA, this would be a good candidate, but I just thought it was pale in comparison. One thing that I do highly applaud for this book though is the author is not afraid to kill off characters. There's no rules in this one, and it was so refreshing to read a book that's not afraid to do that. So if you're looking for a book that will keep you on your toes, this is pretty good at doing that. It's just such a hit or miss book with people that I'm automatically advise going out and buying it because you might not like it as much as everyone else like me. I gave this book 3 stars. Proceed with caution if you're interested in reading it. The next book I read is also for review, and I have a review coming up for that one soon. It is Wink Poppy Midnight by April Genevieve Tuhulke. This book is a contemporary book. It follows 3 characters whose name are the title. The rundown of the situation is that Poppy is a mean girl that Midnight has been in love with his whole life, but Midnight moves away with his dad, so he decides that in order to rid her of his mind, he's just gonna befriend his new next door neighbor, Wink, and it follows their chaos that ensues together. It's very twisted. There's a lot of psychological thriller aspects to this. It's a book that you shouldn't go into knowing a lot about because it is so mysterious. I told you way more than the inside flap gives you because this is literally what the inside flap says. It's like 2 girls, 1 boy, 1 summer. What happens? It's like, I don't know, tell me. But I did really enjoy this book. I just love April's writing and April's storytelling abilities because she writes creepy books and I love it. And it was just so gripping. I really liked it. There are a couple of parts that are like, that, but I don't think this is a book that's meant to be taken at face value. It's very symbolic, it's very dark and twisted, and it's not like a light summer contemporary where like what you see is what you get. There's very deep layers to it. The characters are very quirky. It's almost like Rainbow Rowell characters, except they have this layer of darkness. They're very flawed. If you like books that mess with your mind and they make you think, this was a really good one. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Moving onward. The next book I picked up is Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. I picked this up because I was so terrified of getting spoiled. There's been so much discussion about this book lately. So this book follows a girl, Lou, and she recently loses her job, and so she's job searching. The first thing she finds is a person who needs a caretaker just to be like a friend, and that person is Will, who's been quadriplegic because he was in an accident that caused him to lose all motor function below his neck. So he just needs someone to be there during the day to help him out with his life and to be his friend. It ends up being more than just that. I don't think I can I say? Is that a spoiler? The huge discussion going on with this book is about disabled people and ableism. The argument is, does this book perpetuate the stereotype that disabled people do not have good enough lives to live? I liked this book. The main thing I need to discuss here is I did not like it as much as the hype suggested I would. I did not cry. I thought the writing was cool. Like, it was a really immersive read. It was interesting because I've never read a book about having to care for a quadriplegic person before, especially a person that is verbal. I think it's an interesting realm to learn about, especially as an able-bodied person. My roommate last semester had a sister who was quadriplegic, and that was her everyday life, was having to assist her to just like go through the basic necessities of life. And I think that's just something that was really eye-opening to read about. It also made the book just that much more tragic. It should be understood that Will is rich, and he lived a very privileged life. For a disabled person who is confined to a wheelchair, he was really lucky to live the life that he lived. You know what, I can't discuss this without spoiling it, but I just gotta say, I think there was a different solution than what happened. I don't know if I agree or disagree with the arguments that are going on about all the perpetuation of stereotypes and stuff like that. I was a little bit disappointed coming out of this. It was an entertaining read, like I said. I'm just gonna tell you my rating. 3 stars. Hard to discuss. I don't think I'm gonna be seeing the movie. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna move on to another book that I also don't know how to talk about, and I hate myself. Why? I didn't need to do this. It's fine. Okay, yeah, I freaking reread Shatter Me. Fight me. The last time I reread this was July 2014. It's fine. Actually, there's an interesting story behind why I reread it. I have never been able to get anyone in my family to read this book. They all think it's the spawn of the devil. I don't know what the deal is. I finally convinced my aunt to read this, but she would only read it if I read it out loud to her, so I read this entire book out loud. True fan. It was a struggle, and I think she was only listening like 10% of the time, but I had a blast doing my Stale Warner voice. I had a blast fake vomiting every time Adam walked in the room. It was just a bucket of fun. What can I say about this book that you guys don't already know? Nothing. I think I'm just gonna add to my commentary that I already have going on about it. Like, obviously, if you're new here, I freaking love this book. Favorite series. Just, I've loved this since I was like a wee egg. I still love it. I'm still trash for it. Every character in this book, I'm like, yes. Even the characters that I hate, I'm like, yes, die. The writing, gorgeous. The people, gorgeous. The author, gorgeous. Everything, gorgeous. I will say though, like, people always assume that since I say that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. No, I could write, literally I was reading this thinking like, I need to write a list of the things that I don't like about this, because there's a lot of not cute things about this book. I realized reading it out loud how ridiculous the writing style sounds. Like, I think it's pretty at some points, but mostly it's like, okay Juliet, shut up. I understand why people don't like it. It can be annoying, it can be too much, it can be really creepy, it can be gross, it can be not the best thing in the world. I get it. Like, honestly, I reread it and I was thinking to myself, if I read this year, this would be like a 3-star book for me. I'm obviously not gonna lower my rating of it just because it's so monumental in my life, but it's not like the best book in the world. That being said, I love it. Moving onward. So good. Highly recommend. Box set comes out August 3rd. Go buy it. And the last book that I read this month is another controversial book. This should just be called like controversial wrap up instead of summer wrap up. I read Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. This book follows a kingdom where the prince gets overthrown and he is sent off to the enemy kingdom to be a sex slave for their neighboring enemy, and he has to hide his identity as the prince because then drama will unfold if everyone finds out, and he's just sold off into this life of sex slavery. This kingdom he goes to is just fraught with sexuality. Literally everyone there's gay, and there's a lot of good things about this book and there's a lot of not so good things about this book. If you've never heard of this book, I'll let you know right now, it has a very reputation. I'm just gonna let you know right now, if you're homophobic or you don't support gay relationships, first of all, like, unsubscribe to me, but second of all, this book would not be your friend because that's the entirety of the relationship in this book, is everyone is gay. It's so refreshing. I love it. I will say the two main reactions to this book are OMG, ew, that was so unnecessary, gross book, rape and sexual assault and pedophilia, hated it, never read the rest of the series, or this book's great, political intrigue, interesting characters, blah, blah, blah. I'm somewhere in the middle of that. I understand why people hate it, I understand why people love it. Although there are rape scenes and they're surrounded by sexuality and it's not ever anything that directly involves the two princes or the prince and the slave that are the main characters that you can detect. The reason why I don't see it as problematic is because although there are problematic aspects in it, the main character, and possibly main characters, plural, recognize that it is not a good thing happening, that it is a gross thing happening, that it is a wrong thing that is happening. And he does not perpetuate any of the events that happen. He does not want to participate. He doesn't want to watch. He thinks it's just vile. I think the thing that kept me afloat throughout the first half of this book that was very explicit and very strange is that the prince that he was sold off to, Laurent, first of all, great guy. Actually, no, I take that, not a great guy. But you can tell there's a complacency he has being a prince. But people read the first half of this book and go, oh my gosh, that is so horrible and gross. But just like, I don't get it. It's not acceptable. Totally understandable. But I think the detachment that the characters have to that trauma, what I'm trying to say is I think I have already ordered the sequels. I think that the characters are what's going to keep this book afloat. I think the developing relationships and the uncovering of backstories and histories and opinions and just like breaking down the walls of their very covered exteriors is just gonna make all the difference as far as figuring out what's going on in the minds of these people in this kingdom. But if you haven't read this book, the gist is do not read it if you think you'll be triggered by any of the things I've discussed, like rape or pedophilia or sexual assault or abuse, or if you don't like gay relationships. Also, one criticism I have of this book is that it's written by a girl. This is definitely a woman on this back page, but there are 0 female characters in this book. 0. Kind of disturbing, but what are you gonna do? It's already published. And I hear that the second book's the best in the series, so I'm just gonna stick with it and see where it goes, see if it gets better or worse. I gave this book 3 stars. Again, I'm right in the middle. I see the hope in this trilogy. I just don't think the first half of this book was the smartest decision. I was just in a coffee shop editing this video and I realized I had a really not great commentary on Captive Prince, so I wanted to go ahead and add this clip in that would kind of clarify what I'm trying to say, because now that I am further into the series, I'm halfway through the 3rd book right now, so I wanted to kind of clarify where I'm coming from, because what I said kind of seemed like I was defending some of the bad actions that were occurring. They are witnesses to events that happen that involve rape and just gross practices that include sexual assault. Most of the instances, they are witnesses to events that occur. And the main character states explicitly that he thinks it's gross and it's not right. And he even tells Laurent at some points, like, this is not cool, which is obvious. And I wanted to point out there that I think this stands in more as world building more than anything else. If you ask pretty much anyone who has read the first book, it's almost a consensus between everyone that that is really not necessary for the book. It is pretty brutal, and I will admit it doesn't happen at any other point in the series, just like the magnitude of the events that conspire there. But it needs to be established that that is the world and the mindset of those Varetians, which is the kingdom there. I got a message on Tumblr that was saying it romanticizes and eroticizes these things, which isn't true, because the main character directly says that it is not good and he does not agree. And even Laurent, who is the prince of the kingdom this is occurring in, has a very obvious disattachment, which is why I said he has a complacency about it, because he does not participate in these things and he does not directly support them, which is what I was saying when I was saying maybe later in the series we'll learn more about him and why he doesn't support those things. Laurent later in the series is trying to defeat the king that these things occur underneath. I know I'm still defending it, which might not be cool to some people, but I wanted to say more clearly in this clip that just it's not meant to be there just for the obscenity of it. It serves the purpose to show the men in this kingdom, in this community, that are so violent and ruthless. And it's not pretty. It's definitely triggering to some people, but it's also not supposed to be taken as something that the prince endorses or loves to do or participates in. It's very obvious that he does not participate in it, does not want to participate in it. This was a really long clip. I didn't mean for it to go on that long. Yeah, okay, back to the clip. I'm gonna stop talking about it now. Did you like that book? Let's talk about it. I'm all over the place. That is everything that I read for the first half of this summer. If you want to talk about any of the books that I mentioned or go further into problematic aspects, or maybe if I misspoke about something and you want to correct me, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe if I'm not seeing something that I should be, that should be told to me. Now I'm done talking. Thanks for watching. Have a good life. Goodbye.